My name is Miloon. I am the Executive Director of the Housing and Land Rights Network based in New Delhi, India. And I was formerly from the years 2000-2008 UN Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing with the UN Human Rights Council. I'm very happy to be here and to participate in this expert group meeting on forced evictions that UN Habitat is holding. I think it is a major opportunity to promote human rights to housing and related rights approach. It's a major opportunity to recapture and restore, in a sense, the message that was there in the Habitat Agenda that came out of the Istanbul Conference in 1996. Subsequent to that, in a way, there has been a failure from UN Habitat to capitalize on all that work, to promote a truly rights-based approach across the world and in all the activities and programs that UN Habitat is doing. And there have been many questions within the agency about the relevance of the human rights approach. What we are going to be able to do during this week is to explain in detail what that approach means as far as protecting people from forced evictions is concerned. But it's also very important to understand what does that approach mean for specific programs that UN Habitat has. So for example, if there are interventions UN Habitat is making on urban planning, if there are interventions they're making on water and sanitation, if there's work that's being done on post-disaster and post-conflict, what does the human rights approach really mean? And in that sense, it's an obvious step for UN Habitat to take. The human rights approach is not a choice. It's something that all agencies have to work on, have to elaborate. And it's also an opportunity for UN Habitat to stress that it is one of the leaders in the field. It's very important that the agency staff, the agency leadership acknowledges and pushes forward the human rights agenda, because this is what is happening around the world. Now we have a situation where countries are reporting under something called the Universal Periodic Review process to the Human Rights Council. They're monitoring their work on human rights, and it's a major opportunity for UN Habitat to offer technical and other assistance to countries. So given the scale of violations and dispossession on the ground that is increasing around the world, whether it's forced evictions or the number of people being forced to live in inadequate and insecure conditions, this is an opportune time, and I very much welcome that possibility of assisting in this process. Given my experience and my availability, I'm happy to assist in ensuring that UN Habitat makes a more elaborate and a more precise intervention on the human right to housing and related rights that the agency is working with. Thank you very much. I'm Miloon. I'm from the Housing and Land Rights Network in India, and I was formerly the UN Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing with the Human Rights Council. During my time as Rapporteur, we developed these basic principles and guidelines on development-based displacement and evictions, and subsequent to that I have been working with the Housing and Land Rights Network to develop an eviction impact assessment tool, which the UN guidelines called for. And we are working with local communities in assessing the damage from evictions. We are presenting this information to the courts, particularly the Delhi High Court, and we are field testing the eviction impact assessment tool in different parts of India. The main purpose is to understand the severity of the impact and to do it also before an eviction happens, but also afterwards. And I think this has been a process of public education with the communities. It has been a process of enumerating damages, that the kind of assessment that is not done normally. Well, in the past we had interactions with UN Habitat on the issue of evictions. In terms of even when the Habitat Agenda was developed, we had interactions on how the issue of eviction should be presented in the Habitat Agenda. And subsequent to that, we've had not regular contact, but some contact with Habitat on specific national issues where, for example, when I was Special Rapporteur, I worked with UN Habitat in Afghanistan. We did some work. I followed the work in Iraq and there was interaction at that level, but it has not been a consistent interaction. I think UN Habitat can play a critical role in alerting the global community and in working with national governments and other partners to highlight the enormous amount of, number of people being displaced because of forced evictions. But what this requires is a human rights approach, and I think what we are seeing at this expert group meeting is a consensus from people that UN Habitat has to become a much more forthright human rights organization, because it has that mandate from the Habitat agenda. So I would see UN Habitat doing much more work on the issue of forced evictions and being much more proactive in terms of highlighting the violations that evictions happen and the lack of national legal and policy measures to protect people from forced evictions. And evictions that are development-based, that are there because of conflict, that are there because of disasters. Actually, UN Habitat has not engaged with this issue at all. Since the adoption of the Habitat agenda, the UN Habitat had the mandate to work on the right to housing, including the work on forced evictions, but it has failed to adopt that mandate, and it has consistently failed to protect. It says that it has local partners, it works with local communities, but whenever there have been evictions around the world, UN Habitat has been silent, including in many cases here in Kenya itself. So I think the agency really needs to come out of that shell and become much more proactive and to regain its credibility with people and with communities, because the credibility around the world right now with communities is very low.
Hello, I'm Bahram I'm from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and I work on economic, social and cultural rights, more specifically on the right to adequate housing, the right to water and access to land. I've been very much involved with UN Habitat through the United Nations Housing Rights Program. This is a joint program that is run by UN Habitat and OHCHR, and the program has been very much focusing on trying to develop and to implement or help implementing the standards, international standard on human rights and housing. This work has been very productive. We have very good products and documents that have come out of this work. I nevertheless think that Habitat needs to embrace more generally the human rights perspective and not only confine it to a program or a section. And therefore there's a need for everyone in every section in Habitat to work on human rights. One of the entry points I see for that is that UN Habitat has the technical expertise on housing issues, and therefore it could provide very good advice and support to follow up of recommendation of human rights mechanisms. These mechanisms give recommendation to state on how to improve the human rights situation, for example, on housing, on the water, etc. But these recommendations need to be supported by an agency, by some experts, and Habitat has a very unique role in that. Now, obviously, this is something that should be done in collaboration with other UN agencies, and of course, OHCHR is very much ready to engage as much as possible with UN Habitat on these issues. We have already done this in the past in several occasions. We are looking forward for more collaboration, including at field level. So I very much appreciate and advise for any of our field colleagues of UN Habitat to engage with OHCHR on different housing rights issues, whether it's the promotion of housing rights, whether the issues of forced evictions. And I hope the overall outcome of the EGM that we're going to have this week will come up with even other interesting proposals for UN Habitat.
Let me say that my little small statement here is related to the fact that I spent my lifetime dealing with children in another UN organization called UNICEF. And now I'm entering into UN Habitat dealing with something like forced evictions. My reflection today is the following. it was very difficult for me to convince countries that their children were malnourished. They couldn't see it. They admitted they have a right to be well nourished, but they couldn't see the malnourishment. Now, when I meet new friends in UN Habitat, I ask, why is it so difficult to get the world to understand the right not to be the subject of forced eviction? Everybody sees it. It's loud, smell, bang, bang, bang. My God, if I'd had that type of thing when I spent 30 years to mobilize governments on the right of children's nutrition, my question is, why has it been so difficult for UN Habitat to mobilize people against something so obvious that an individual, a family, has a right not to be forcefully evicted? Thank you.